Time to talk some big racing at Belmont at the Big A. Make sure you head to shop.drf.com. Still have the past performances and the DRF picks. Believe they just finished up with the Clocker reports last week, but some of that has to do with the fact that now we're getting involved over at Keeneland. They have big racing action starting up this weekend. You can get the full past performances package and save huge money if you want to get past performances for the full meet. They also have betting strategies over there. And then the Clocker reports are available every day out in Southern California. But for this video, we are going to talk about 4 graded stakes races at Belmont at the Big A. Joining me to discuss those, good friend of mine, someone who I've talked many hours of racing with over the last few years, works for NYRA and NYRA Bets, does such a great job promoting the sport for them, handicapping, being an ambassador over there for New York racing. Matt DeSantis joins me. Matty, buddy, there are big days like the Breeders' Cup and the Kentucky Derby and Triple Crown days. And even on the Breeders' Cup day, I think we have 9 Breeders' Cup races on Breeders' Cup Saturday and maybe a couple graded stakes races earlier on the day. On Saturday alone, there are 16 graded stakes races in North America, 18 total. You have 4 right here that you and I are going to talk about at Belmont and Aqueduct. Keeneland has 5 graded stakes and an all stakes pick 5. Santa Anita has 4 graded, 1 non-graded. And then up at Woodbine, they have a nice car too with 3 graded stakes and another stakes. So it is maybe as busy of a day as there is the entire year in horse racing.
It really is. You're absolutely right. It's a huge weekend, and it has a huge weekend for Breeders' Cup implications because in addition to all those graded stakes races, from Friday to Sunday, there are 20 Breeders' Cup Challenge races this weekend, which is just a stunning number between, like you said, Santa Anita, Keeneland, Belmont at the Big A, but then also over in Longchamp in France with the Arc de Triomphe and all of the other races that they have going on over there. So it is a massive weekend, tons of implications, so many great horses putting in their final prep races before the Breeders' Cup. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Okay, and so I'm going to be, like most of you out there, kicking back, playing all these races, watching all these races from Belmont at Aqueduct to Keeneland to Woodbine to Santa Anita. But then after that, I've got USC, Minnesota. I've got the game 1 of the Dodgers playoff game. Whoever they play will be game 1 Saturday night. And WWE Bad Blood. It's going to be quite a little Saturday for me, Matty, from top to bottom.
It's a fun little Saturday. I don't know what we're going to get into.
Maybe I could go to Bed Bath & Beyond if we have a little time. Who knows? I'm not sure, but we'll see. I know one thing you and I are going to be doing. We're going to be dipping our toe in the pond at Belmont at the Big A. I thought the card, and in particular the graded stakes that you and I are going to talk about right in the middle of the card, came up really nice. And these 4 stakes races that we are going to discuss, they're the start of a mandatory pick 5 right in the middle of the card, right, Matt?
They are. And so it is mandatory payout pick 5 in middle of the card, includes all 4 stakes races. And I agree with you. Across the board, you're looking at large fields, competitive fields, and I think these are a really fun series of races, both on the turf and the dirt. And we should say, I know I'm tempting the weather gods and our good friend Andrew Champagne, but it looks like there's all good weather this weekend up here in New York. So should be fast and firm for these races.
Fingers crossed. Let's dive on in. Race number 5 is the Grade 3 Jockey Club Derby Invitational. I think this is like the 3rd in a series of races that we've actually seen Legend of Time in a couple of those, the Belmont Derby and the Saratoga Derby. So we can kind of start the talking with Legend of Time from the outside. He was your beaten favorite in both of those races. To be honest, in the Saratoga Derby, I thought Carson's Run kind of ran him right down on the square, and he really had every chance that day. And while I really respect Legend of Time, Matt, I've probably been a little disappointed in him, kind of just overall his body of work. He's going to take a lot of money. He's only won 1 of his 4 starts that we've seen him since coming here for Appleby. He's moved forward a little bit, but probably not progressed as much as we would have liked. But him and Carson's Run, I think from a talking standpoint, those are the 2 that'll probably vie for favoritism in here. I think David has them set as like 5-2 and 2-1 between the 2 of them. I like Carson's Run just as a horse overall. He's really cool because everything in his body of work makes sense, Last year, he was a grade 1 winner. Found the Breeders' Cup group maybe a little too tough, and then that was his last race of the year. So if we do the old toss 2 angle, where we excuse him for his last race that sent him to the bench, and then we're maybe a little forgiving for his first start off the bench this year, everything else makes sense.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, he's a horse that's honestly surprised me a little bit with how much he's progressed in each of his last couple of starts, and coming off a second place effort in that Nashville Derby. But I'll be honest, that was still a really impressive effort, sitting second to last, and then being able to handle the ground at Kentucky Downs, going a mile and 5/16. And that's always impressive to see how horses can handle that.
Lost to a
Obviously,
nice shipper that day too, a
yeah,
Euro horse who's probably just a little better going long that type of distance, a little more foundation.
absolutely. And, it picks Dylan Davis back up. And, it's been the summer and now the fall of Dylan Davis, who has just been getting horses home in big spots repeatedly at Saratoga and now back down here at Aqueduct. So I certainly think a really nice horse is going to be coming from well off the pace, is going to be
And
sitting a little bit further back. And
have
that's
to
one
mention
of the
that, right?
things. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I'm interested in looking in this race because, Gino, you and I can lament this. But if you look, there's not a lot of speed in this race. And
No,
stop me if you've
none.
heard that before in New York. But
None.
I and,
Like,
and that's where I wonder, and I agree with you, and I echo everything you said about Legend of Time. But I wonder if Flavian guns it from the outside
gets aggressive
and
because
it,
there's
and he just goes and goes basically, I'm going to try to take them gate to wire, and maybe this horse is a little bit better just up on the lead when nobody else is pressing him. I don't know, but it's interesting.
so there are 3 horses that I think could be the horse to get the lead or maybe get aggressive because it's
Yeah.
honestly that difficult in this race. There's not even a proven front runner where we're like, yeah,
No.
we know they're going to get the lead. We have to guess who's it going to be. One of them could be Dashman
Yep.
because and I would make him, I kind of made him my top pick just because of that by default, because I love the way he's improved this year at 3. He's taken a nice step forward. I don't really know how good the fields he's defeated are, but he sure feels like a type of horse who should either be on the lead or saving a bunch of ground down on the inside and not too far out of it. Makes a 3rd start of the form cycle in any type of exotics. I want to use him because of that. I think he could probably be really close up in here.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And Manny Franco aboard, Manny's always really aggressive about getting horses out, strong jockey, can get them out there on the front end. And I think even if Dashman doesn't get the lead, and also we should mention sired by Oscar Performance, and I just absolutely love Oscar Performance babies. And, but even if he doesn't get the lead, he's sitting a pocket trip at worst.
Yep.
And so, but he's going to be on the rail and saving all the ground. And, you could say, well, maybe the question is he's switching off Lasix, having run the last
and that's very fair.
Lasix, which is fair, but it's going to be built into the price.
Absolutely.
So you're getting a good value on a horse that, yes, is a little unproven, but might get the right sort of trip. So I think he's one. And then I have to imagine Linda Rice's horse, Yo Daddy, might be one of the others to potentially try to go up on the lead.
Has to be. Just coming out of shorter races and races that have quicker early fractions, you feel like that's by far his best chance in here. And he's not going to sit and pass, some of the better, like Carson's run. So by default, he could get there. He just has been a little bit better on the dirt, right? Just faster and better on the dirt. That's what's kind of an enigma about him. And he was a runner-up last time out in a race that he probably wouldn't even have finished second, right? There was an incident in that race, I think, where a horse didn't finish and he ended up kind of taking advantage of it. But I think you're right in Legend of Time being probably one that's forward. And I wouldn't actually be shocked. This was somewhat like a David Aragona angle in talking about this race a little bit with him for DRF. We previewed the race for the YouTube. He was expecting maybe Deterministic to show a little bit more early speed, which actually wouldn't shock me in here, being there are 2 Clements. There's not very much speed in here. He's, he has races where he's just naturally probably in a better spot than most of these horses are. I wouldn't be that shocked if they wanted to get a little aggressive with him and at least get him way closer in the race than it looks like he's been recently.
Yeah, and I think he showed a little bit of tactical ability in that Manila 3-back, and certainly showed a little bit of speed as well when he was on the dirt and the Gotham, being able to sit kind of more of a tracking trip that day, just a length or so off the pace. he's a horse that, I mentioned Carson's Run has kind of surprised me to some extent. I'll be honest, Deterministic has too, because when they switched him to the turf, I thought that made all the sense in the world. There was plenty of turf pedigree there. I was a little surprised that they kept stretching him out because I always thought he was a little bit more of a miler or maybe a mile and a 16th type of a horse, but he's managed to get more ground every single time and look pretty good doing it. Obviously, winning that Virginia Derby in pretty thrilling fashion, beating Grand Mo the First and another horse in here, Desvio, who's on the inside rail.
Yep.
And again, I don't know if a mile and 3/8 is what he wants, but you're right. They're both Clement horses in terms of Deterministic and Carson's Run, and Deterministic could help ensure at least an honest pace and really not be that far out of himself to do so. Because while we talk about these horses getting up front, the pace is going to be 25 and 50. I mean, they're not going to be going blazing up front. So I think Deterministic, interesting horse, and one that, like I said, has kind of exceeded my expectations a little bit as he's stretched out. But yeah, Dashman's an interesting horse. And I'll give a shout out to a horse that I think you're going to see as a big price. And maybe I'm just going to be using underneath, but that is the number 1 Desvio. And this is a horse that stepped up onto the turf. Debuted on the turf and then went to the dirt for a while. Stepped up several starts ago, won on that Preakness undercard over a really soft turf and an allowance race, then steps up and wins the stakes race at Delaware Park, then goes up and faces a really solid company, like I said, Deterministic and Grand Mo the First in that Virginia Derby. I thought made a pretty good run of things and finished third that day. Now you're getting, connections that New Yorkers don't really know that well. And this horse is probably going to be a little bit dead on the board and could be a big price. And I could see this horse, again, saving all the ground on the inside rail, maybe running up for a piece and doing so at double-digit odds. So one that I'll be using in my deeper exotics.
What's nice is that when you watch his races, he's definitely a horse who should have no problem distance-wise. We saw that in the Kent. So getting a little more distance in here, I think, is a positive for him. He looks just like a grinder. And he had a little more of a sneaky, tough trip in the race than Deterministic did most recently in the Virginia Derby. So he should have no problem getting the trip. Just a horse to mention, I don't know if the race sets up for him. El Razine's definitely been good since the blinkers went on. And, he had a good effort on July 20th, and then he came right back and he really proved it last time out. Those are 2 nice efforts back to back. I just don't know how the race shapes up for him because it doesn't seem like there's all that much early speed in here. And that gets us to Legend of Time, who will again be, one of the top 2 betting choices in here. It'll probably be between him and Carson's Run, and he should get the jump on Carson's Run.
He should. And listen, it really is going to come down to rides. I mean, this is really a rider's race, I feel like. And you've seen Flavian Pratt do this a couple of times where he'll just go, something, forget it. We're going straight to the front. He did it with White Beam, actually, in the Diana up in Saratoga. He did it with Silver Knot a couple times as well, where he just goes, looks around and he goes, okay, if everybody else is just not going to go, I'm going to go. And, be aggressive about it and put this horse in a little bit more of an advantageous spot. That said, this horse, has burned money 3 out of 4 starts in North America. So it's hard to trust this horse in this spot at a short price for connections are going to get bet down.
It's a look at the Grade 3 Jockey Club Derby Invitational. It's going to go as race number 5 on Saturday at Belmont at the Big A. Kicks off a mandatory pay pick 5 that will have 4 graded stakes races in it. The next one up is race number 6. This is the Belmont Turf Sprint. Matt, this race, and then we've got one at Keeneland coming up on Friday, I believe. Any turf sprinters are just, no Cogburn. No Cogburn in these races. Like, okay, now we're like, they're rolling up their sleeves. Okay, so we got a chance. So you're saying there's a chance, because for some of these horses, when you have to run into Cogburn, who's just been an absolute freak of nature, it's like no chance. Like you see for Axelum from the inside, and you see a couple others who have had to deal with him. So you feel like this is a more of a contentious, open race. But honestly, for this type of a race, Matt, not a ton of speed.
No, there's a lot of horses. It's interesting. You're absolutely right. There aren't a lot of horses that need the lead.
No.
which again is a little surprising. There are a lot of horses that like to track right off the pace, but there's nobody that really needs to go to the front. And I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic. You wonder if, jockeys look at past performances too, and you wonder if a couple of these jockeys who are on tracking horses and whether they kind of all have the same idea of, hey, maybe I'm going to try to steal this on the front end, and maybe you end up getting a faster pace than you think you're going to get on paper. But a horse like Determined Kingdom might be the speed of the speed. He's cross-entered though down at Keeneland, and it'll be interesting to see whether or not he can kind of take advantage of that, or whether or not a horse like Allegon could go up there. We just saw that horse win the Parks Dash a couple months ago down there in Pennsylvania. So it's an interesting race. I agree with you about everybody just kind of being relieved that Cogburn's not here, but you have some interesting horses. I mean, I think it's notable that a horse like Mischievous Angel keeps Irad Ortiz Jr. aboard for Jorge Abreu, who's been pretty hot up here in New York over the summer. And this is one coming off of a win at 7 furlongs at Kentucky Downs, which I think is really impressive. And again, might be running up against it a little bit because the horse doesn't have great early speed, but I really like Irad when he's coming from off the pace. So
and 6
that's
furlongs
one I'll be interested to see.
Feels perfect for him, right? You look, both of his wins going 6 furlongs on the turf. He also has another win at 7, and you can say, okay, the mile's too far, and the 2 races going 5.5, probably a tad short. One of them, he was chasing a lone speed winner, Boats a Rockin', Don't Come a Knockin'. That was on June the 7th. So you all of a sudden you go through his entire body of work. He's lightly raced. He has upside. He's going to make the 3rd start of his form cycle. He's a horse that I'm using in the pick 5 for sure. The 9, to me, I think I have to throw in just because of the prospect that he could go and be one of the quicker horses from the outside. More recently, they've been kind of tracking with him. It seems like since with Ruiz aboard, they've sat a little bit more, but he definitely has the speed in his arsenal if he wants to use it. And he's absolutely capable of winning a race just like this. Look at the race in November the 18th at Aqueduct over this turf course, winning at 6 furlongs, beating Allegon, beating Boats a Rockin', who we just saw defeat one of the other common rivals in here, and he earned a 98 Beyer speed figure in doing it. So, horse who loves to win races. He's an 11-time winner and a 5-time stakes winner, and he fits right around this level. He's not quite a graded stakes horse, but he's a solid turf sprinter. He's right below the top tier turf sprinters.
Yeah, I think you're right. He's a listed stakes type of a horse, and maybe you can get up and get a grade 3 like you could here. And and I'll say, Jorge Duarte Jr. has had again another nice year this year. It's not a huge barn, but his runners are always live. I always think he does a great job training them up and getting them ready for these spots. And you're right. The horse kind of tracks a little bit, although the outside post position is perfect for that. Because if the 2 horses, if Allegon and Determined Kingdom decide to try to go a little bit more up front, then he's sitting on a perfect spot of just being able to sit right off of that and be able to get over. And you're right. He's a horse that likes to win, 11 for 30 in his career. And he also, he just runs honest. 18 for 30 in the exacta. This horse just doesn't really run bad races ever.
No.
And a lot of times the races that are a little bit off usually are either
off the bench
coming back from the
layout
or right before. Yeah.
Very honest horse from the outside. Mentioned Allegon. Talked about Determined Kingdom, who could possibly outrun his odds a little bit. Mischievous Angel is sort of the fun up-and-comer. And then a horse who I'm curious to what price he'll be is Outlaw Kid, because this is his game. 6 furlongs over this course. That's another horse who all turf sprints, Maddie, they don't play alike. Think about the different types of turf courses that we have across the country, right? Think about the 5 furlongs at Gulfstream Park versus the 6.5 at Santa Anita or at Kentucky Downs. Those are way different style. And then a 6 furlong at Belmont at Aqueduct is much different than both of those, how it plays out. A horse like this who's proven going this trip, you have Pratt aboard. He's not fast early, but he's got a little more positional speed than I think it sort of looks like some of the times, and he doesn't have to be that far out of it. So if he's in the 5-1 range, that's kind of a fair price for him in here.
I would agree with that. And listen, whenever you get Flavian Prat aboard, that's a good thing. And and George Weaver knows how to train these horses on the turf a little bit. It's funny, Weaver had a little bit of a slow Saratoga, and he's kind of the barn's really picked up a little bit since coming back down to the city. And I just think he, able to spot his horses in a little bit more realistic spots down here, as opposed to, just running in a lot of grade ones and grade twos up in Saratoga. And this feels like a right spot for him, certainly. And again, another horse that hasn't finished out of the exacta the last 5 times out. And you're right. I think has more tactical speed than people realize. I mean, I know it was an off turf race, but made it to the front in the Troy. And, so it has some speed to be able to get up there. And, you look at, a few starts back and against Optional Claiming Company, was really tracking pretty close to the pace. But the thing is, I know sometimes when we love DRF and we love, the past performances. I love the time form US early and late pace indicators. And sometimes when you see a horse that has very similar numbers on early, late pace, they get the reputation of being one paced. But this horse is not. This horse can pass other horses and does it regularly. So the horse has acceleration to come from off the pace. It's not like you have to put the horse in the lead to get the win. So I think this one with Flavian aboard is absolutely live. And I agree with you about the price. If you're 5-1 or higher, this one I think looks really live in that spot.
Any other horses or anything else you want to mention about this race, Maddie?
I'll just mention Axthelum
Yeah.
or Saffy Joseph with Dylan Davis aboard. Now, again, the horses cross enter down at Keeneland. We'll see where he ends up going. He's training down in Palm Meadows. So, whether he comes to Kentucky or comes here, a little bit of a question mark. But Saffy, again, has been firing off pretty well, coming off a second in the turf sprint, or third, I should say, to Cogburn. I was going to make a joke. I'm sure, he's thrilled not to see Cogburn anymore. And so, those last couple of races are really, really good.
They are.
And he had a couple of races that just weren't that great at Churchill, at Monmouth. Maybe one was a little too short. And my concern with him is he gives himself maybe a little too much to do in some instances. And if he doesn't get off that well from the inside rail, it could be tough for him to kind of carve out the right trip.
But this group is pretty evenly matched.
Yeah.
So there aren't really horses that look like they stand out all that much above the rest. There's a few in here that seem like they're probably they're not as proven against some of these horses quite as tough. So they'll have to step up. But the difference between like the ceiling of some of these and the floor, without a horse like Cogburn, it just makes it a much more competitive race.
Yeah, and when you're talking about it from a pick 5 standpoint, this is a very spready race. I mean, this is one where, I think you can go a little skinny in these next two that we're going to talk about, but this is one where I'm going 5, maybe even 6 deep in this particular leg.
Yep, lots of chances in here as we move to the grade 1 Frisette. So back-to-back grade 1s for the 2-year-olds. First up, the fillies, and these are both Breeders' Cup win and you're in races. We had one of the most impressive 2-year-olds, filly, Colt, Annie, and that was Senza Parole, who was extremely impressive. Senza Parole earned a 94 Beyer speed figure, won by 7 3/4 on August 23rd at Saratoga. And, sometimes horses will win, get a big number, not exactly sure who they beat or how strong the race is. But when you're looking at the daily racing form formulator past performances, you can take a look and see that the runner-up, Stunner, came back in her next start. She won by 6 1/4, and she earned an 86 Beyer speed figure in doing so. And was it the 4th place finisher? I think that another one in this race that I thought had come back and run, but it was a
4th place. One other horse came back to run a much better race next time out.
Yeah, that was the key. Just showed the improvement there.
It was Complex Secret came back to actually improve by 20 Beyer speed figure points and finished 3rd down at Churchill.
Yeah, earning a 76 Beyer. So what that does tell you is that race was strong because horses coming out of it also improved and ran faster. So probably a pretty accurate speed figure. So I have no knocks on her, the race, anything. Just the gambler and the counterpoint and the devil's advocate would be when horses run big figures like this first time out of the box, usually you can't really take a step forward. Usually you can only regress. And
Yeah.
now she can regress and still win this race. We see it happen often. Actually, like the horse right next to her did this at Gulfstream or did that at Delaware and then Monmouth, right? Social Fortress earned a big speed figure, came back in her for a 2-year-old at that point, a 71, came back, ran a little lower, a 64. But when we see horses run the high 80s, 90s, 100s first time out, a lot of times they do regress. That would be my only counter to this because she's definitely the horse to beat. And another positive for her too, Matt, she showed that she can sit off horses a little bit. She's not just
Yeah.
a runoff horse.
No, not at all. And that was a very professional effort and keeps Irad Ortiz Jr. aboard, obviously. I was talking with Acacia Clement about this, and she said it's interesting. As a gun runner, she's a little bit of a lighter horse. She's not necessarily built like you would expect a lot of gun runners to be built in terms of being a little bit bigger and looking like two turns. And she's more of a kind of a racy athletic type. And so it's interesting to see. I think the 1 turn mile is actually a good setup for her. But you're absolutely right that a horse that runs a 94 in debut is typically going to regress. And even if this horse regresses to a very modest amount, let's say this horse runs an 88, that allows some other horses to potentially step up.
Yeah.
And, one of the horses that I'll just mention that I really liked in the spinaway, who just the second the gates opened, you just knew she hated the conditions, which I'll be honest, I was there that day. I hated the conditions too. I wasn't even on the track. It was an absolutely miserable day of weather. And that's the number 3 Pondering.
Nice. This is the horse who I actually I made her my top pick by value. I put Senza Parole second, but just I wanted to give her another shot.
That's exactly my logic. She looked so good in debut for Machado. And at going 5.5 down at Ellis Park, the horse was under wraps. I mean, just being absolutely not strangled, but like just not even being asked to do anything and just blew by everybody. Looked so good that day. Attracted a little bit of attention. I mean,
She
went
was
off
only
at
5-1
the spinaway.
Yep.
And, and I think Immersive and Quiet Side, who you're going to see down at Keeneland, and the Alcibiades are both outstanding horses.
Agree.
And like I said, just you knew from the get-go she did not like the weather at all. She did not like the kickback. She didn't like the track. And now we're going to have dry, fast conditions on Saturday. I'm willing to give her a second shot. And oh, by the way, Flavian Pratt comes aboard. This is Daughter of Hardspun, Godolphin homebred, Brendan Walsh. Just a lot of things to like about this horse. And I just think she's got a lot of ability. And I'm willing to take a little bit of a gamble to see if she can get back to that debut form that she showed. Because if she can improve off that 75, then suddenly she's in the conversation, I think.
Absolutely. And, she didn't break on top in her debut. She sat about 2 lengths off and she kind of moved up to third. I'd love to see her getting a trip just like that in here. I think there's a couple other speeds. The one, Snow White, is very quick and I think really talented too. Snow White ran a bang-up debut race going 7 furlongs, put away the other speed, just couldn't hold off Quick Kick. But she ran really well, and her dam was a multiple stakes winner going long. 2 of her siblings won going long. The blinkers come on, and the barn is really good second time out. Like, this horse could show a lot of improvement, but I think she's going to be part of the speed. The Queen's MG wants to be close. You go through the field. Scottish Lassie was sitting right behind, but kind of loomed up. Another Cliche was forward. So Senza Fortress is probably the quickest of all of them. So I think they'll be going pretty quick in here. I'd love to see Pondering sit just off a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think Snow White, that's a really dangerous horse who's still a maiden. If she can handle the pace pressure, like you said, the pedigree would suggest she absolutely can get there. Quick Kick, who she lost to in debut, it's a real nice runner. And just a little bit more experience. If I'm not mistaken, Quick Kick lost to Lacara in debut, who, of course, we then saw it go on to win the Pocahontas. Yep. So this one also has been working out well. Like you said, Danny Gargan, always better second off the bench, gets the blinkers on. And Joel Rosario, we think of Joel sometimes making those great furious runs late on the turf. But I think Joel's at his best when he's on the lead, quite frankly. And I think he's a great rider when he gets a horse up on the front end. And you're right. This one has the pedigree to suggest that she's going to like going a little bit longer. So I think you can find some arguments for some of these other horses. I know, when I was speaking with Acacia Clement, she really liked Scottish Lassie as well. She thought that, coming out of that same race, she thought this horse, sired by McKinsey, really was going to appreciate more distance and stretching out to a mile. And obviously loses Irad Ortiz Jr. for Jose Lezcano for trainer Jorge Abreu. But that's another one that's probably going to be a pretty big price because she's a maiden. And, it'll be interesting to see, but she can sit just a little bit off, maybe try to carve out that same trip we were talking about with Pondering.
There were two other kind of fun horses I wanted to mention before we finish up the Frizette. Paradise City comes in from Gulfstream.
Yeah.
This horse was visually very impressive. Kind of sat off a little bit, close up, kind of backed off to third, was in tight quarters, waited nicely, and didn't seem like a 2-year-old making her first start. She just kind of responded to everything they were asking her to do. And her dam, Washington Bridge, is a grade 2 winner going a mile and a 16th. So she was visually impressive. She looked nice putting the horse away, and she should be able to go a little bit longer. Not exactly sure who she was beating there, but she checked a lot of boxes for things that you're looking at, and she'll probably be double-digit odds in this race where Senza Paroli takes a lot of money. And I thought even the New York bred was really impressive. And I thought, Matt, it was one of those instances where she drew the rail, so she was forwardly placed in there. I don't think she's a need the lead horse. I think it was kind of down inside, you know what, let's push through instead of getting shuffled back. That'll probably work out better for us. And then you just go on with it. I could see her sitting off the pace a little. I think she's really talented for a New York bred. And that was a monster effort.
It really was. And Gary Contessa can jump up and win these big races every once in a while. And so I think this one is absolutely one to certainly consider in your deeper exotics for sure.
Underneath horses, for sure.
Absolutely. And I agree with you that I think Junior just had to go on that inside rail. And now it doesn't have to. Can be a little bit more patient, can sit potentially. And going back to Paradise City, by the way, shout out to my third grade classmate, Eric Wesley, who once got up in the middle of music class and sang the entire song Paradise City by Guns N' Roses in third grade music class.
Always reminds me of Can't Hardly Wait, right? Yeah, isn't that what he's singing? Like the dorky guy, William, is singing. I used to tutor a guy that take me down to the Paradise City.
And so, I don't know what that horse beat either, but what I like is it was 6.5 furlongs, which is a good distance, I think, for a debut. And you mentioned Gulfstream Park before as it relates to the turf. The fractions weren't insane because sometimes you see fractions down at Gulfstream Park and you're like, there's no way this horse can replicate this up at any other track in terms of how fast they're going in some instances. That was a reasonable race. And I absolutely agree with you about just that horse visually looks so good. Another daughter of McKinsey. So it's interesting to see. There are definitely some hot sires here. And we're going to talk about a McKinsey in the next race as well. So I think it's a fascinating race. If you can try to beat Senza Paroli, then we gave you a couple of options to do it. I will say I'm against the Queen's MG. I'm kind of against What the Literal. So I think you can find a price somewhere else.
Yeah. We both started with Pondering as the horse who, you know what? And I think that's a great way of playing horses like this, where if you liked her a little bit going into the Spinway, you're going to give her another chance here and she'll be a better price. So, maybe you throw her in. They'll all have to step up, no doubt about it, because Senza Paroli is head and shoulders above from what she's done so far. But lightly raced 2-year-old, we don't have a whole lot of a resume and body of work for these fillies. So things can change quite a bit from start 1 to start number 2. Let's finish it up, Maddie, with race number 8. This one is the grade 1 Champagne. What is so fun about a race like this every year is just the prospect of what it means. This race, grade 1 Champagne, you have horses that will try to get into the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, but you're even thinking bigger. You're thinking about the Kentucky Derby when you have horses like this and where they could be next year. And last year, Fierceness was in this race. He was an also-ran. He didn't really fire in this race.
Right.
This was right after his really good maiden win, and then right before his really good Breeders' Cup Juvenile win. The zig and the zag in there. But you don't ever really know who you might see in a race like this. Some really solid, legitimate horses from a starting point. We can start to the outside with Chancellor McPatrick, who has been very good in his 2 starts. He's a grade 1 winner. He won the Hopeful. He earned an 88 Beyer speed figure in doing so. The thing about him that's little unusual for horses at this point of their careers, Matt, is very rarely do we see these horses that are this good at 2 that are not that fast early or that have had kind of trouble out of the gate both times, which I think we can say maybe a little slow, and then he hit the gate and just kind of got shuffled back. But he doesn't seem like he really wants to start racing early on until about halfway through. Even with some of that early trouble, we can make excuses. I just don't expect him to be a fast early horse. That's kind of interesting because normally good 2-year-olds are horses that just kind of run away from you or can work out their own trip. That hasn't been the case with him.
No, it hasn't. It's been the complete opposite. And I joked with I joked with Acacia. I said I was there for both of his races. I was on the rail for both of his races. Neither time did I think he would had any chance at all turning for home. And both times he just tracked everybody down. And you're right, in that maiden win, he didn't even break poorly. He just wasn't very fast out of the gate. That's
and then
all.
kind of got shuffled.
And got shuffled and really didn't like kickback on the inside. And you could see him, if you watch the head on going down the back stretch, was really throwing his head up in the air quite a bit. And then Flavian just kind of eventually angled him out. And man, when that horse starts picking people off, just he starts coming. And in the hopeful, it was the same song, second verse, except this time he did have a little bit of trouble at the gate and just ended up being in the back. The difference was he was a little further outside that time. And you could see he just, I think, preferred being outside instead of being inside taking kickback. And again, made a huge late run, picked up Ferocious, actually, who ends up kind of getting re-engaged when he sees Chancellor McPatrick go by. Those two finish 1-2. And, certainly a horse that visually should have absolutely no problem getting a mile and should absolutely love the added ground. And I do have to say, is probably going to get the pace set up because there's a lot of speed in this race and a lot of horses that want to go straight to the front. So he's going to get the pace. He should like the distance. And if he can just even get away a little bit more cleanly from the far outside post, then he certainly looks like a very formidable horse to get by just based on the class that he's beaten, because Ferocious is likely to be your top choice, or worse, your second choice down in the Breeders' Futurity this weekend.
Yeah, the third place finisher in that race too was a nice one. I think he had a kind of a setback that I think he got sick or some kind of an issue because he was going to be pointed to the Keeneland race as well. But this was a good group. And yeah, that's what's difficult because with his running style, you want to try to beat him, but the race looks like it sets up pretty well for him. It really
it's
does.
a little bit, it's kind of the conundrum you have, and it's funny that's another Chad Brown horse, is the conundrum people have with Sierra Leone.
Yeah.
Where it's a horse that comes from well off the pace, and you look at a race and you go, well, there should be a lot of speed in this race, but there's just very little margin for error when you're coming from that far back.
That's a great point.
Now, that said, one of the advantages that Chancer has, because he's a little bit more precocious than Sierra Leone was in terms of being ready earlier, is that he gets all these one-turn races that Sierra Leone never got. And Sierra Leone always had to close on a pace that was a 2-turn race, and the dynamics are just different in 2 turns. Yep. And so I feel like if Sierra Leone had been ready in July, last year, he probably would have racked up a lot of these impressive wins going 1 turn because it would have set up perfectly for him.
Getting a little more to run at.
So, and so it's going to be tough. I will say, just to kind of move to another horse, I think there are 2 other interesting horses that are both Todd Pletcher runners in here, and that's both Tip Top Thomas and Uncaged.
Yep.
These 2 were also very impressive in debut. And, Tip Top Thomas winning kind of up front a little bit and pressing the pace. And what I was impressed by was that it wasn't an easy maiden victory, which sometimes those debut wins can be just so impressive and, they won by 7, and you go, wow, that was something really else. This horse battled against Rookie Card, who was very game to the inside. Key Waden was coming flying late, really dug down and fought and ran, I thought, a really good race. And it's interesting, Irad chose to stay aboard him rather than staying on Uncaged, who he also ran. Joel Rosario up now. And that's a horse that I think if you think there's a lot of speed, and you're a little afraid of Chancellor McPatrick not getting the right setup, then Uncaged feels like a really good alternative. A horse that was able to sit mid-pack and then move might be able to get the jump on a horse like Chancellor McPatrick.
Yeah, that's exactly where I landed, Maddie, with a lot of the reasoning that you just said right there. Just hoping that he can sit a little bit. He showed us it. He got a great trip, but it's the exact trip I'm hoping he can get in here. He was 4th, about 2 lengths off. He was inside. He was able to angle to the 4th path. And then what was impressive there, he separated late. To me, that was, oh, light bulb went on. Okay, he looked like a horse who should have no problem going a little bit longer. And then you look at his dam, Dark Nile. She was a 4-time winner, and all of those wins came when she stretched out and went a mile and beyond, including
Yeah.
the Delaware Oaks. So this is a horse who should have no problem going a little bit farther, should get a beautiful trip, maybe sitting just behind some of the other speeds. I think, and then when we're just talking about, like speed figures and stuff, him and Tip Top Thomas, they're not far off
No.
Chancellor McPatrick at all. In fact, they actually ran faster in their debuts than he did in his debut.
Absolutely. No, they're right there. And if they're able to take a step forward and Chancer maybe, either levels off or takes a step back, I think they're really legitimate threats there.
Yep.
And, the other thing, and I think it depends what side of this horse you're on, right? So
Yeah.
if you like Uncaged, you can make an argument for it. And if you're against him, you can make an argument against it. But he debuted over a muddy sealed track. Now, on one hand, you could say, well, maybe he just liked the slop more than the other horses. On the other hand, you could also say we might not have even seen the best version of him
Absolutely.
in that race. So getting over a dry, fast track, maybe he runs even better than he did in debut. So I think they're, again, which depends which side of the coin you come down on. I will say,
I think the coin, what? And I think coin was a great use because a lot of it has to do with price, right? Like you saying which side of the coin, because for me, if this was Chancellor McPatrick who was going to be short and his win or wins were only on a muddy track, then I would have more trepidation, right? On playing him. But for him, it's like, okay, yeah, maybe he's 5-1, 4-1 in that range. Like maybe you're strong second or right there in that second choice range. That's probably right where he should be. I think that's fair. But it's absolutely something worth mentioning because you're right. Where while it could be, you know what, maybe it was the muddy track that made him look a little bit better. There is also the possibility that maybe he didn't even love it all that much and he still got the job done.
Right. I mean, maybe, notoriously 2-year-olds are very fickle about conditions. So it would not shock me in a field of 7 if all 7 of them did not like the conditions at all.
Yeah. And he did.
And so he was just kind of the best of the group and just class kind of prevails. A horse that we should probably just mention in passing because he is 3 for 3, and that is Moplex for Jeremiah Englehart coming out of the win in the funny side, as well as a win right before that against, Graded Stakes Company, winning the Grade 3 Sanford. I do think a mile might be a little too far for this horse, and I'm not 100% sure. The horse's speed figures would need to improve pretty significantly. I thought it was telling that Jeremiah pointed this horse towards the funny side rather than the hopeful after winning the Sanford. And I think that kind of tells you what he thinks of this horse. And that's not a knock. This horse was a $45,000 sale that's already earned close to $250,000. So they're doing great with this horse. But I do think this one's maybe a little bit more of a sprinter type rather than going a little bit longer. Picks up Manny Franco now. And one of the things I was talking with Acacia about, and she said this horse kind of runs his race before he gets onto the track a little bit. Is a little bit of a head case in the paddock. Can
and
kind
going
of get
longer,
up,
that's a little worry too, right? Against tougher and going a little bit longer. That, if you're getting rid of some of your stamina out there. But very honest New York bred who has already stepped up and shown that they can beat open company. But yeah, they'll have to beat the best group that they've ever faced and go a little bit farther. But honestly, there's some solid horses in here. I mean, like top to bottom, inside, you have a nice New Jersey bred who stepped up and has been very good in those last 2. You mentioned Tip Top Thomas, Lethal Speeds race. Like this horse closed from 7 lengths out of it at Gulfstream, which is never easy to do in a career debut. We talked about Moplex and Uncaged. Vekoma Rides was very impressive. Visually, he sat just kind of like 3 deep. They sort of just kept him in the clear all the way around. It was a really nice effort. Him and Executive Order were ready first time out of the box. They were both coming into the race training well. Executive Order had a little bit of buzz. He was extremely impressive. I mean, this is a solid group. I thought Smokin' Wicked ran a bang-up race in the Hopeful. He had to deal with a lot of pressure, and he finished 4th, but the 3 horses who beat him all came from way behind him and close, so it set up really well for them.
It did. Smoking Wicked's a horse I like a lot, and he's shown a little bit of versatility. He came from a little further off the pace in that Bashford Manor, although admittedly that was a nuclear pace early in that race, and so all the horses that were coming from a little further off benefited from that. But he showed much better speed last time out. I don't think he's a horse that necessarily wants to be on the lead, though. I think he can sit kind of more second, third. Has Dylan Davis up this time. And I like this horse quite a bit. I agree with you. He ran a very good race, all things considered, in that hopeful when he finished behind Chancer, Ferocious, and Incentive Pay. So I think he's one who I don't know if he's going to love the mile.
That's the
but I
key,
do
right?
think, yeah.
He's a nice
but he's
horse,
an
though.
interesting horse.
He keeps his speed figures are getting better and improving
Yeah.
each and every time. That's all you're asking for. So if you're looking for fun underneath horses that you think could at least be forwardly placed and hang around for a slice, this is a horse who could get forgotten about. I mean, he was 30-1 in the hopeful last time out, and he might get dismissed, but he ran very well in that race. I really enjoyed handicapping these races, Maddie. I thought, fingers crossed, if we can keep them, on the grass, and if the surface conditions are all are all as best as in dry conditions, I think we could have a really nice string of graded stakes races out there. Always fun when you have some 2-year-olds too, because you never know if you could be seeing the next Breeders' Cup Juvenile or Juvenile Fillies champ or Derby or Oaks winner. So, Maddie, let me know. What do you want to mention? What do you have going on? Give us the YouTube channel, the plug, anything out there that you want to talk about.
First, I'm going to give people the weather report for Saturday, just to give everybody. It's going to be sunny, not even partly sunny with a high of 74. I mean,
that's
just
beautiful.
That's a Chamber of Commerce day, so it's going to be a great day.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's like we traded places, and I'm out in Southern California.
I love it.
No, a lot going on. Obviously, check out the Naira Bets YouTube channel if you haven't already. We just passed 2,000 subscribers, so we're really happy about that. And got a lot of great content up this week, capping the card for the entire Saturday Keeneland card. Acacia Clement joined me to preview the Frisette and the Champagne. And then I actually have Matt Chapman from overseas at the races coming on to help me preview the Arc de Triomphe and all those great races over in Longchamp in France. So we got a lot of great content there. Got a lot of great promotions up on Naira Bets, the whole 9 yards. So follow me at X on at Failed to Menace, and you can get all that great content there.
Honestly, appreciate it, because I was starting to handicap the races. It's so nice that the New York races come out really, really early with the entry. So they came out. I started looking at them. I said, I didn't realize how good this card was going to be on Saturday. I threw up the bat signal just about a day in advance, and Matt was able to jump up last minute and help me out. So much appreciated, buddy. Thank you so much for coming on, and hope you have a great Saturday. Good luck there. I'm sure you're going to be like me, kind of like your head on a swivel all over the place. Because I was thinking about going out to Santa Anita, but it's like, I think there's so much going on everywhere else that I'm probably better suited at home just to be able to pay attention to everything that's happening there. So hopefully it all goes well on your end.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Always great talking to you. And yeah, let's have a great weekend of racing.
So we'll be following Matt at Failed to Menace, and check out everything NYRA Bets. He does such a great job there, always keeping you updated on the big races in New York and everywhere else. So good luck to all of you out there playing on Saturday at Belmont at the Big A. I'll have videos for Friday Keeneland, for Saturday Santa Anita, and for Saturday Keeneland, and for Saturday Woodbine. All of the big stuff this weekend. We'll have videos for you, and it'll all be on That's What She Said podcast. So good luck all over the place on a really fun weekend of racing.